Welcome everybody, Kelly here from KB Auto Tech and Adventure. Today we're at my shop. We got my 97 4Runner in the shop and we are going to do a suspension lift. We're going to do some Bilstein 5100s, OME coils, 883s in the front and some 890s in the rear. So let's go, let's check it out. Well, here we go. First thing we're going to have to do is remove the track bar. This is that horizontal bar that you can see here from the rear. Best to remove this bar when the vehicle is still sitting on the ground. That way there's no weight on the bolts and it just comes out much easier. So let's go ahead and remove the two bolts from the either end, knock them through, and let's remove this and put it to the side. Now we'll need to go ahead and remove the rear sway bar links. Depending on how long they've been on the car and where you're from, they could be very rusty. You may want to consider just cutting them off, throwing them in the garbage. If not, penetrating fluid, wire brush is your friend, possibly some heat if you need to go that far. Also, this is a great time to consider upgrading because we're doing the lift. The end links are going to be a little bit short and they're going to apply a little bit of load to the suspension. So we could consider putting in some longer links. What we can do here is we can put front 3rd gen 4Runner links to the rear and 2nd gen rear links to the front. This is basically a combination that will work to give you some longer length. With the links undone, we can now go ahead and remove the rear shocks. Basically, I pop the bottoms out and then we're going to go ahead and pull the springs, then we'll move to the tops. You can do most of this by yourself, but it definitely always helps to have a friend kicking around. Always use the extra hand and some extra leverage. All in all, the rear suspension is pretty simple, but this is probably where you're going to have a hard time. These upper shock nuts or bolts, whatever you want to call it, are generally rusted and not going to come free. The shock body wants to turn on you. It's a difficult spot to get into. I basically just gave it a quick try, said forget it, let's just cut these off. So if you're at home, this may be something that you're going to want to consider. I'm not sure exactly how you would do this at home. If you can get a Sawzall or something that's electric, as most people don't have air at home. So yeah, cut it off. If you weren't aware, these 3rd gen 4Runners and Toyotas in general have a little bit of a frame rust problem. Mine's actually pretty reasonable condition, but these upper shock mounts definitely had some rust on them. So now's a good time to consider, getting a grinding wheel, cleaning it down and putting some primer on there or some other type of coating because the shock's out of the way. So why not? All right, so here we go. We got our shock, pretty simple, top, bottom. Now, if you've never seen this before, it goes pretty simple. I'm gonna put this washer on the bottom with the rubber bushing, then we put it up in, and then we put the other rubber bushing, the other washer, and the nut on the top. Simple on the bottom, one side, other side, we press it on and just put our nut back on. So let's go ahead, let's get that done. Go ahead, put the shock up into the tower, put the washer and the nut on there, and go ahead and tighten it down. Try not to crush the bushing too much. You definitely need some load on it, but nothing crazy. This is where your buddy can come in handy. Putting the spring in. If he could pull down on the drum or move the axle down, it would definitely help getting that spring up into there. I just use a pry bar and just sort of got it into position. In order to get this shock on, you're going to have to jack the rear end up. At full droop, the shock just isn't long enough. Go ahead, lift it up, and also push that shock on very hard. The factory bolt is a little bit short. If it was a 1/4 inch longer, it would have made this considerably easier as well. Also, Land Cruiser rear shocks apparently have more travel. Maybe they would just reach in general, but who doesn't love rebuying new parts again over and over? So maybe that's what we'll be doing in the future. Who knows? Like I was just saying, that bolt is a little bit short, so I just wanted to make sure I start it by hand or basically with a hand tool and not use my air gun and strip it right away or cross thread it, even worse. So yeah, here we go. Just tighten it down by hand until you know you're fully engaged properly. Well, we ended up by getting half of it done. So we got our shock installed, we got our spring installed. Gonna leave the sway bar end link undone for now, and the Panhard bar, track bar, we're gonna leave that off for now. We're gonna move on to the other side. We're gonna cut that other shock out, clean it, prep it, get that shock installed, get the other spring installed, and then I'll pick you up from there. We're basically, it's the exact same thing. You don't need to see two sides of it. It's the same thing, just, you know, work through it and get it done. All right, we're on to the last step. We have to install the Panhard bar. And what we've done here is added half of the correction kit. I'm gonna quickly zoom in and I'll show you that. Long story short, I ended up by planning on swapping my rear end and doing a couple of things. So anyways, I'll show you basically what we've done and where we're at with that. Springs are installed, shocks are installed. We've added the new front sway bar links. So we've taken the 3rd gen front links to the rear, and those are a little bit longer. And then we will put 2nd gen, 2nd gen fronts to the rear, or sorry, 2nd gen rears to the front. So anyways, let's have a look at that real quick. Well, if you wasn't sure what I was talking about, a couple of times I referenced the Panhard Correction Kit. So essentially what it is the 2 weld-on brackets, one to the rear end and one to the body. What this does is it corrects the angle on the Panhard bar or the track bar and allows it to have the right angle. Once you've lifted the vehicle, the distance is no longer the same, so you either need an adjustable bar or the correction kit, and I think the correction kit is probably a little bit better. For quick comparison, you can see here how much longer these links are. We're definitely going to want to use these. Unfortunately, we're going to have to remove the old one, and these things are always stuck and a pain in the butt. So probably some vice grips and, you know, air tools if you have it can definitely be a big help. If you have something to cut it off, that's even easier. I would just cut it in general, but I have this, so it works out pretty good with, you know, air and some vice grips. Well, let's install this link. So we've got 1 nut on the bottom, and then the top essentially just like a shock. 2 washers, 2 bushings, and a nut. Put it through the hole, tighten it down with a little bit of preload. Lastly, we need to get this Panhard bar in. What I usually do is put 1 bolt in, leave the other one loose, and then lower the vehicle down so it's weighted, and rock it back and forth, and wiggle that bolt through. Well, congratulations, you got the rear suspension lifted. So I just wanted to take a quick moment out and ask you if you could please do me a favor. If you're finding this video informative in any way, maybe even possibly entertaining, please consider subscribing to my channel and liking the video. Really helps me out, and I really appreciate you guys watching and all the support that I've been receiving lately. So thanks so much. Let's get at that front suspension and let's get this thing lifted. Let's build the strut. First thing we're going to need to do is compress this spring. Now you can use one of those sketchy spring clamps if you'd like. Me, I wouldn't even bother. I would probably just take it to the shop. That is so much simpler. But go ahead and compress your spring whichever way you're managing to do that. Let's go ahead and do that first. First thing we need to do is check the ring on what setting we're going to be using. Because we're using a lift coil, we're going to put it on the lowest setting. Then we're going to slide the spring retainer down onto the shock. With the spring retainer on, we go ahead and put on the shock bellow. Then we put on the washer. The new bushing is inside the strut mount, so go ahead, put the strut through the spring. Then we put the bushing on, the washer, and the lock nut and tighten it down. Well, we built those struts earlier on. That's pretty simple. We got it all assembled. You will need a spring compressor, of course, to get that done, or you can just send it out to a shop. Most shops really shouldn't charge you all that much to do it if they're fair and honest. So let's go ahead, let's look at the front here and see what we're gonna need to do. This is pretty simple for the most part. The only thing that you're probably gonna get caught up on is these upper strut bolts. Potentially, depending on age and where your vehicle's from, how rusty they are. They may need to be heated, they may need to be cut. They may come off perfectly fine. So sort of just depends on a few different factors. So what you're going to want to start off with here is wire brush. Wire brush this really good. Soak it. You could even do this a few days ahead of time. Soak with some penetrating fluid over a few days, just to hopefully they'll crack loose and come off easily for you there. Beyond that, we just have the bottom bolt, and we can just take that off by hand or with air tools, obviously, like I am, and just pull the strut in and out. So really, in reality, this is pretty simple on the front, so it shouldn't be much more of a hassle, or much less of a hassle compared to the rear, obviously. So let's get going. Well, no surprise here. If you've seen any of my videos, wire brush and penetrating fluid is definitely your friend. Use it, it'll help you out. Time to go ahead and install the strut. Place it up into the location and put the nuts onto the top. If it's not lined up perfectly at the bottom, you can go ahead and use a big screwdriver or some sort of punch and turn the strut so it's located correctly. Now, I've done this quite a few times on my own, but for whatever reason, this time here on my driver's side, I had a little bit of a hard time trying to get that lower nut in. I definitely needed help from a friend. Luckily, he was in the area, and we had to use some pry bars and a piece of wood to basically put downward force on the suspension so I could put that lower strut bolt through. Well, that's it. Do the same thing on the other side and you're done your front suspension lift. Next up, we're going to do something that seems to be a little bit controversial, and that is going to be a front diff drop. Basically what ends up by happening here is we put a spacer in here on the front differential, which lowers the front of it down a little bit. Apparently some people say the angle is bad or it doesn't seem to help, but a lot of people still seem to do it, so I'm going to go ahead and do it and see how it goes. If it doesn't work out, can always remove it, no big deal. So basically what I've gone ahead and done here is taken out the two long bolts for the front diff. There's a nut on the top. I've used a wrench and a gun. You saw me remove that. We're going to go ahead, put the washer in there, or the spacer, put the new big bolt in there and the nut on top and tighten those back down. And essentially that is really about it. When you buy the kit, it comes with a couple of spacers for your factory skid plate, so we can go ahead and install those, put the bolts back in, throw that baby back on, and we are ready to hit the ground. Before we do the road test, one very important last thing that we're going to have to do, and that is a wheel alignment. Now, I'm not going to take you through the whole alignment because obviously you're just not going to have one of those at home, but I will show you the process of what the numbers look like. So stay tuned, we'll quickly look at my alignment specs. Here we are on the wheel alignment rack. Let's go ahead and attach the 4 alignment heads to the wheels. After that, we quickly do the roll compensation, and then we do a steering wheel sweep and centering of the wheel. After we're all set up, here's my pre-alignment numbers. As you can see, the toe and caster are completely out. And after I made my adjustments, there we are. Caster, camber, toe, all set and ready to go. Well, it's just been over a week and I've been driving the truck. I even had a chance to take it out on the trails once. It turned out really well. I got a video coming up for that pretty soon, and we got the wheels and tires on finally. So I'm super excited the way it turned out and the way it looks. Got some KMC wheels on there and some Cooper STT Pros in 285 75 16. So all in all, I mean, I think this was a pretty simple job. I mean, it definitely takes a little bit of work, and you're going to need, probably some help and, tools and whatnot. But the lift really isn't all that hard to do, and, I think you can get it done. So anyways, I hope this video helps you out in any way. So thanks so much. Appreciate you watching, and yeah, see you in the next video. Thanks so much.